Good morning, friends, and welcome to our Friday morning live stream here at Empty Cloud Monastery. I hope that you're all doing well, whether you're watching in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, or whether you're watching this video after it's already been recorded. I hope that your practice is going well and that your life is proceeding in a comfortable and healthy way. And today we're going to be discussing the qualities of the Buddha. We're going to be going over the recollection of the Buddha practice, Buddhanussati practice, because as I discussed before, this month is Vaisakha. So today, this is the month of the Buddha. And on May 4th here at the monastery, we're going to be celebrating Vaisakha Puja, so the celebration of the Buddha. And so I thought that we could go over a little bit more the qualities of the Buddha and spend this time talking a bit about that. So hello to all the people who are joining in so far. I see comments from Manal and Maria. Good morning to you both. Hope you're doing well. And at this time, I'll render homage to the Buddha, and then we can go ahead and get started with this morning's talk. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Saranang Gacchāmi. Okay, and hello, I see even more friends joining in. Gregory, Meredith, Madeline, and Jayanta. So sadhu to all of you listening in, and also to Rebecca. Hope you're all doing well. Okay, so today we're going to be, as the title says, talking about recollecting the Buddha, remembering the Buddha. So the Buddha is the best role model for all of us. He's the best person to look up to and to be inspired by. And given that this is the month of the Buddha, it's kind of a whole month. We have a whole lunar month to recollect the qualities of the Buddha and inspire our practice. And so if you haven't done this practice before, if you have been maybe a little bit weary of these more devotional practices or a little bit more unsure about how it is that the Buddha figures in our practice, then this is a good month to go ahead and explore that, right? You can just use the excuse of just the moon to look into the Buddha's qualities and look into how it is that we can uplift our hearts with this more, you could say, devotional and faithful aspect of the practice. So maybe I'll say just a few words about that just now, because I know that for many people it's foreign, and for other people it's very familiar. So some people, they're very, very familiar with recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, and they're very familiar with devotional practices, right? Such as doing pujas, offering candles and flowers and incense, and maybe even bathing the baby Buddha statue, which is often done on Vaisakha Puja, and very familiar with the life story of the Buddha. And other people are less familiar, and they're more familiar with maybe the precepts and meditation, but less so the pujas and the offerings and the bowing and so on. So Buddhist practice really integrates both of these together. And often in specifically, I would say in the West, there's often a division between what we might call like faith and reason, right? So in the Western tradition, there's a classic kind of dichotomy between those two things. But in the Buddhist tradition, they really go together, and they really help and support one another. And I think that would be true of really any deep religious practice. But especially in Buddhism, that's something that we emphasize, that faith is a very important and nourishing quality, and it really can uplift the heart and inspire us, and it's actually indispensable. So all of you are acting out of faith this morning, and acting out of faith, whoever watches this and listens to it, because it requires some kind of trust or confidence or faith to even engage in any kind of activity, right? Even just to walk across the room, we have to have faith that the floor is not going to fall beneath our feet. And so faith, it's really not something to be afraid of. And it's actually very, very good. It's very important to have faith. We just want to balance it out, right, with our practice, and balance it out with reason, so that we don't end up having faith in something which is not trustworthy, right, which is not actually a safe refuge. And so recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, recollecting the story of the Buddha, and so on, and practicing the Buddha's teachings. That's one way of developing faith in line with a safe, reasonable refuge, right? In line with something that you can develop trust and confidence in. Because as we recollect the qualities, and you can start to go over, okay, what is it that we have faith in, right? What is it that we have faith in? And then also following the teachings of the Buddha and following the practices that the Buddha gives, you can start to see, well, who was this person based off the teachings that he gave and the practices that he taught? And you can start to see in your own life, what are the results of those practices and how do those affect your life? And that can start to give you some faith in the teacher who taught them, right? And so it's the faith practice, it goes together with the practice, and they kind of nourish one another. And someone who attains stream entry, so someone who attains the first fruit of the 4 classical stages of enlightenment that the Buddha teaches, someone who attains the first fruit of that, it says that they have avijja pasada. So that means that they have unshakable or experiential experiential is the word. Unshakable or experiential confidence or faith or inspiration, you could say, in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, and in the what's called the noble Sangha, so the Buddhist community of noble disciples. And so you might say, well, faith is not always a blind faith, but actually someone who practices well, someone who sees for themselves the teachings of the Buddha, then they actually have unshakable or experiential faith in the Buddha. Because we'll talk about that more, but you could say that as one approaches the practice and deepens their practice, and if someone touches what the Buddha himself had touched, if they touch the point or the kind of center out of which the Buddha was speaking, right? If they touch that same, the enlightenment experience that the Buddha had also had, then they can have full confidence in the Buddha, because they will experience where the Buddha was coming from, and they'll experience what the Buddha was promising that they could experience. And so it's through practicing diligently the Buddha's teachings that one can come to have full faith. And there's another sutta where the Buddha called the simile of the elephant's footprint. It's this would be the, can't remember if it's the greater or the lesser now. I think it's the lesser simile, Majjhima Nikaya 27. And this is where the Buddha is saying that just as you might follow the footprints of an elephant and eventually you can find the elephant, in the same way, essentially, he talks about how someone can follow the practice, the gradual training that the Buddha has taught, and eventually they can arrive at discovering the Buddha, and they can arrive at full knowledge and confidence in what the Buddha taught through following the practice. And so the practice it's really one of nourishing this faith in the teacher and following his example, and following the example of all the other disciples who have followed that teacher. And then eventually, through your practice, you can realize what the teacher himself had seen. And you can, we say, you can see the Buddha face to face. You can really come face to face with the Buddha. So those are a few words, just a few brief thoughts on the role of faith, the role of what we call saddha or pasada in Buddhist practice. I see Madeline says that she did a retreat on devotion to the Buddha with Bhikkhu Bodhi, and it was nourishing. That's wonderful, Madeline. Sadhu. I know that Bhikkhu Bodhi often leads recollection of the Buddha practice, so that's wonderful. Okay, so at this time, what I would like to do is there's a sutta called the Dhajjaga Sutta, and I thought I could go ahead and read that, and then we can just discuss it. We can take this as our starting point. So yeah, I'll go ahead and read that. If you'd like to follow along, I'll put it here in the description. This is 11.3, Samyutta Nikaya 11.3. The other day I talked about the story of Sakka turning around from the birds and chasing after the asuras. So today we're going to be reading also, this is from the Sakka Samyutta, for those who know that. So you can go ahead and follow along, and I'll go ahead and just start reading this from Bhante Sujata's translation. At Savatthi, there the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Buddha said this: once upon a time, mendicants, a battle was fought between the gods and the Titans. Then Sakka, Lord of gods, addressed the gods of the 33. Good fellows, when the gods are fighting, if you get scared or terrified, just look up at my banner's crest. Then your fear and terror will go away. If you can't see my banner's crest, then look up at the banner's crest of the progenitor, King of gods. Then your fear and terror will go away. If you can't see his banner's crest, then look up at the banner's crest of Vaḍḍha, King of gods. Then your fear and terror will go away. If you can't see his banner's crest, then look up at the banner's crest of Isana, King of gods. Then your fear and terror will go away. However, the Buddha says, when they look up at those banners' crests, their fear and terror might go away, or it might not. Why is that? Because Sakka is not free of greed, hate, and delusion. He is fearful, scared, nervous, quick to flee. But, mendicants, I say this, the Buddha says, if you've gone to a wilderness, or to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, and you get scared or terrified, just recollect me, says the Buddha. That blessed one is perfected, a fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy, knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train, teacher of gods and humans, awakened, blessed. Then your fear and terror will go away. Okay, and I'll pause there because this sutta actually goes on to talk about recollecting the qualities of the Dhamma as well as the Sangha. However, we're going to be focusing on the Buddha today. So you can see here that the Buddha he's telling a story, right? The story is that the gods, the devas, and the asuras are going to battle, and Sakka tells them that if they get afraid in battle, right? So they're fighting and they start to get afraid. Oh no, I don't know what's going to happen, or maybe we're going to lose, right? And they already know maybe Sakka's a little bit crazy. Sometimes he turns around when he doesn't want to hurt the birds, so makes them charge towards the enemy. So maybe they get a little bit afraid, right? And Sakka says, just look up when you're afraid. Just look up at the crest of my banner. So this is when charging into battle, they would have a banner that someone would be having, right? So maybe the chief of the military, so maybe Sakka, and he mentions a few other gods. And so these are all maybe leaders, right? Kings or generals or chiefs in the military who were leading troops and armies going through different sections of the battle. And so Sakka, he said that if you get afraid, just look up at the banner that they have. And then you see that. So you're over here on the battlefield and you start getting a little bit afraid and you look and you see, oh, Sakka's banner is standing. Sakka's still fighting. And so then you get some inspiration like, okay, keep going, keep going, keep going. The general, he's still going. The banner is up. Just join the army and just, it's supposed to give the soldiers inspiration. Of course, we don't recommend killing. I don't recommend that at all. But just this is the image that Sakka is giving to his army, right? And then he says, well, maybe, okay, so you don't see, you can't see his banner. So maybe Sakka even falls in battle, right? So maybe you can't see his banner, or you're very far away, you can't see it. So then you get afraid. He says, okay, if you can't see the crest of his banner, then you can look to the banner of these other kings, these other chiefs or generals. And so you look at their banner, you say, okay, they're still going, and then that's supposed to give you inspiration, right? And so maybe some people have more experience with this, maybe in some kind of sports or something, right? Maybe the coach is yelling at you, and that's supposed to inspire you, right? Or you see the people who are watching, and that's supposed to inspire you, like, come on, keep going. Or the chief of the head of the team is going, and so that's supposed to inspire you, right? So we have these role models. Whenever we're in a dangerous scenario, we can kind of look up and see, okay, this person is still going, so I should persevere. Or these people are counting on me, so I should persevere, right? I'm part of this team, so I persevere. So it's supposed to give us that faith, right? And so this is the image. But then the Buddha says, he says, however, when they look up at those banners' crests, their fear and terror might go away, or it might not. So you see it, and he's saying, well, sometimes it might go away, but sometimes it might not go away. They might actually still be afraid when they see the banner. And he says, why is that? Because Sakka and all the other deities, right, they're not free of greed, hate, and delusion. Sakka is fearful, scared, nervous, quick to flee. So what is the point that the Buddha is making? Right, he's saying that Sakka is he also gets afraid. He also gets afraid in battle. He also is scared, and he might run away and flee, get nervous whenever things get dangerous. And so looking up at Sakka's banner, you know that actually Sakka is also prone to becoming fearful. He's also prone to getting afraid. And so looking up, you might be inspired, but you also might feel like this is just another person here that's also afraid. So then you don't feel confident, right? Because you know that actually maybe they are also just as terrified. Maybe they're just as scared. And so you don't really feel that there's this kind of fearless protector who's going forward and persevering, but you actually feel like, oh, we're all afraid here, and we would all run away in a dangerous scenario. And so it doesn't give confidence, right? It might give confidence, but it might not, because Sakka still has greed. So he might want to protect what he has. He might want to protect his own life. He might want to not face danger and peril and harm and pain. And so he has greed, and he has hatred. He gets angry, so he might get frustrated. And he has delusion and confusion. So he might make some bad choices sometimes. He might not always do the most inspiring things. And so because of that, and because of the fear that he's prone to, then sometimes you don't have full confidence, right, in the person who's in charge. And this is true in life in general, right? So maybe we're supposed to respect our bosses, our captains, our leaders, but and sometimes people look up to those people, and they look up to the leaders of the crowd and the leaders of the herd, and they feel inspired. But other times, when you think about the leaders who are supposed to inspire you, you don't get inspired, because you think, well, they still have greed, hatred, and delusion, right? They still make bad choices, and they still have fear. And actually, that's just another person up there, just another person, just like me, who has these defilements, who has these difficulties. And so that can make you less confident, right, in the leader, because you start realizing, oh, the leader is really not that different from the people who are afraid. They're just another person who happens to be in that role. But the Buddha is saying that, so this is the advice of Sakka, but he's saying that the mendicants and the Buddhist practitioners, right, all the people who have faith in the Buddha, they also might get afraid. He's saying you might go to the wilderness, you might be in the forest, you might go to the root of a tree, you might be in an empty hut, or you can imagine maybe you're in your meditation hall, right, or you're meditating in a quiet place, or you're even just out and about practicing, but you get afraid, right? And the Buddha is saying that you can recollect the Buddha. And then he gives the qualities. What are the 9 qualities of the Buddha? Itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vidya charana sampanno sugato lokavido anuttaro purisadhamma sarathi satta devamanusanam buddho bhagavati. So that's the 9 qualities of the Buddha. And we chant this very, very frequently. Here at the monastery, we chant it every morning and every evening. And I recommend that you do that, especially for this month. It would be wonderful practice. And he says, so then your fear and terror will go away. And later he says, why is that? He says, because the realized one, that's the Tathagata, the realized one, which is the Buddha, is free of greed, hate, and delusion. He is fearless, brave, bold, and stands his ground. It says, Vita rago, Vita doso, Vita moho. So free of passion, free of greed, free of hatred or anger, free of confusion or delusion. Abhiru achambhi anturasi apalayi. Fearless, brave, bold, and stands his ground. So this actually can give you confidence, right? It can give you more confidence, because you know that actually the Buddha really is free. He's not just like another unenlightened, fearful, greedy, hateful, and confused person. He actually did fully conquer his defilements. He did find the ultimate happiness and refuge and safety. And so the Buddha has this he is a very special leader, right? He's the leader of the community of disciples. And he is a very special leader, because when you recollect him, you can recollect his qualities, which point to his enlightenment, point to that transcendence, right? So recollecting the Buddha, itipiso bhagava, recollecting those qualities can really give and inspire that confidence. It can remove that fear and remove that trembling or that doubt, because you know that there was this person who you can have faith that there was this person who acquired all these qualities through his diligent practice, right? Through his devotion to virtue, meditation, and wisdom. And then he taught that out of compassion, right? So the Buddha taught out of compassion, out of sympathy, out of care, out of love for his disciples. He taught the Dhamma. And so also you can have that faith, right? Just like the leader, they're supposed to be kind of protecting the group. And sometimes though they might be cruel, they might make mean or greedy decisions. But the Buddha, he's the leader, and he's protecting the group through compassion, through his teachings, through his example. And so it can be really, really inspiring to recollect that a qualified leader, right? A really qualified leader. I see some comments from people talking about the inspiring qualities of the Buddha, and Rebecca says she did pilgrimage. That's really wonderful. Yeah. So so before for this live stream, I'd like to then just talk relatively briefly. We don't have a lot of time, but relatively briefly about what are these qualities that you're supposed to recollect, right? So what is this practice? So this practice is called Buddhanusati. Buddhanusati. So anusati means to recollect. So you might know the word sati, right? Sati is often translated as mindfulness, but sati actually means memory. It actually means bringing something to mind and keeping it in mind. So like the example that I often give of this is when you're doing something, you have to remember what you're doing, right? It's a kind of memory. So like if you're washing the dishes and you start daydreaming and then they fall and they break, then what happened, right? You might say, oh, I forgot what I was doing. I lost myself, right? Your mind wasn't remembering the activity at hand, and you kind of got lost in something else. So that quality of being present and of remembering what you're doing while you're doing it, of being able to maintain attention, to keep a particular activity in mind, that's called sati. That's mindfulness. So it's a kind of memory in the present moment. And anusati, anu means along. So it's kind of like when you're walking along a path, you step and step and step and step, right? And you keep walking and walking. And so anusati means to continually, perpetually, again and again, step by step, recollect, to keep in mind again and again and again the same thing. So buddhanusati is to call to mind the qualities of the Buddha. So it's a kind of meditation practice. And the Buddha taught buddhanusati especially to people who were practicing the uposatha, practicing the lunar observance days. So the lunar observance days are traditionally on the new moon and on the full moon. And also, if you'd like, you can do it on the lunar quarters, right? So in the quarter moons. And usually what the Buddha recommended was that lay people follow the 8 precepts on the lunar observance days. So following the 5 precepts all around, and then on the lunar observance days, on the new and full moons, and sometimes on the lunar quarters, observing 8 precepts. And then he said that while you're doing that, he recommended that you practice the recollections. So you can practice any kind of meditation, but he especially taught the recollections. Many times in the suttas, you see the Buddha teaching to especially his lay disciples, also to the monastics, but especially to the lay disciples on the uposatha, teaching them recollection of the Buddha, recollection of the Dhamma, recollection of the Sangha, recollection of one's own virtue and one's own generosity, and then also recollection of the inspiring qualities of the devas, the inspiring qualities of, you could say, the angels, the gods, and how through your own practice you develop those qualities in yourself. So the recollection of the Buddha is a kind of meditation practice. And why do you practice it, right? Well, the Buddha here is talking about when you have fear. And you can expand that. So anytime that you are losing motivation, anytime that you are feeling down, anytime that you are afraid, you can recollect that, like literally afraid. So you might be in a dangerous scenario and you don't know what to do. So one thing you can do is call to mind the Buddha. And it can really be a remedy to fear. So literally fear, like fear and danger, but also lower moods and times of difficulty, then recollecting the Buddha can inspire you, right? Because you know, well, there is something bigger, there is something greater, and you can have this teacher who is really qualified. So what are the qualities? So we recite this, you can recite it in Pali if you'd like, and of course it really is helpful if you know the meaning of the words, or you can recite it in English. Reciting it in Pali has the benefit just of entering in a lineage of a tradition, right? So all the way back to a long, long time, to ancient India. And also when you recite in Pali, then you don't have to select one particular translation. But if you don't really connect with the meaning of the Pali, then you can also recite in English, or you can recite in Thai or in Sinhala or in whatever language you know, if you want to get familiar with the meaning. Okay, so the qualities are Itipiso Bhagava. So that means that he, the Bhagava, he, the Blessed One, it's often translated, has these qualities, and then it lists 9 of them. So Bhagava, we'll actually get to at the end, but Bhagava is the word I'll just mention here. Bhagava is the word that is most often used to refer to the Buddha. So in the suttas, we don't usually say the Buddha in Pali, or in the suttas, they don't usually say, oh, the Buddha said this. They say the Bhagava said this. So Bhagava is like a very respectful title for the Buddha of his disciples. So if you weren't Buddhist, people would say, oh, Sir Gautama, Master Gautama, the ascetic Gautama. So they would call him just by his name, right? Just as anyone normally would. So you just call the person by their name. But the people who were Buddhist, who had faith in the Buddha and who were following his teachings, they called him Bhagava, which is a respectful title for a teacher. So it says the Bhagava, the Buddha, has these qualities. Diso Bhagava Arahang. Arahang, this is the word arahant, right? Arahant. Arahang. It literally means worthy. And it means specifically worthy of offerings. Because the Buddha said that mendicants, so bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, right? Monastics who receive alms food, that receiving alms food, you actually have a debt. You have a debt to the nation, a debt to the people. Because when you receive alms food, unless you've attained arahantship, unless you've perfected your mind and removed greed, hatred, and delusion, then you haven't fully paid back that offering, right? So the debt that we owe is through our practice. That's how we should practice in order to pay back the offerings, in order to create a bigger, more rich field of merit for everyone, in order to be more uplifting to people, in order to be a better contribution or example or kind of star in the world, right? So it's through our practice that we can become worthy of offerings. And so we recollect the Buddha was arahang. He was worthy. He was completely worthy. Like when someone offered the Buddha food, he didn't owe them anything. He was completely worthy, completely debt-free, because the only person who benefited, that you could say, was really that person. So the Buddha did benefit in the worldly sense, but he had no need of offerings, right? So whether he got offerings or not, his mind was completely pure. So the real benefactor of the offering, the real person who is receiving the rewards and the fruits of that, was the donor. And the Buddha was just like a field, right? So who receives the rewards when they plant crops on a field, right? It's the farmer, not the field. So the field, it's really just there to benefit the farmer. The field doesn't really get anything in return, right? It's just that the farmer, by working the field, the farmer gets the fruits from the field. And so the farmer might be very grateful, like grateful to the earth and grateful to the rain and grateful to the conditions that allow them to get what they need, right? So the Buddha is arahang, means he's the field. So he doesn't get anything in return spiritually or mentally. He just is a field for other people. When they plant their offerings, then they receive nutritious, nourishing, and pleasant results of their karma, right? So the Buddha is arahang. That means he's perfected and he's completely worthy of the offerings, worthy by his perfection. And so you can recollect the Buddha by just thinking that one quality. You can think arahang, like maybe that really inspires you, like when offering to the Buddha, he was completely worthy, completely pure, completely perfected. So arahang is one of them. Itipiso bhagava arahang Samma Sambuddho. Samma Sambuddho is a fully awakened Buddha, a perfectly awakened Buddha. Samma Sambuddho. So a Samma Sambuddha means that he obtained complete awakening, right? He completely woke up to the nature of reality, and he did it perfectly, like wholly, completely. So he's worthy of offerings, right? Because of his complete awakening, his complete freedom, his complete knowledge, his complete kind of ripening into a Buddha. So a Buddha, he's not born a Buddha, he becomes a Buddha, and he becomes a complete whole Buddha. And the special quality of a Samma Sambuddha in the tradition is that they become awakened without a teacher, right? So the Buddha, he left home and he practiced and he discovered the way to awakening. He discovered the path to freedom from the cycle of rebirth, to freedom from suffering through his practice, through his own investigation, right? Through examining his mind and through examining his heart and through experimenting and practicing, he eventually discovered the way, right? And he even talks about some of the struggles that he had, like sometimes he encountered fear, sometimes he had unwholesome thoughts, sometimes his mind was restless, sometimes his meditation would have difficulties. And so he worked through that and he found out the way all on his own, right? So think just how difficult it is for us to practice, right? With a teacher, with all kinds of suttas and dhamma talks and other monastics and other lay people who all are practicing and all have different degrees of experience. And it's still very difficult, right? But the Buddha, he didn't even have that. There was no one else who had done what he had done in his lifetime. There was no one else who was teaching the complete path in his lifetime who he could practice with. He had no companions in that sense, right? All he had were other people who were practicing, but they were deluded. They didn't know the full way. And so just imagine. And so the quality of a Samma Sambuddha, it's perseverance, it's energy, and it is just complete devotion. Like you might think, oh, we have to have faith in the Buddha, but just imagine the faith, the saddha that the Buddha had to have, right? It's insane how much faith you have to have in a world where literally no one has accomplished what you're trying to do. Like it's like you say, oh, I want to be an astronaut, but no one has ever gone to space. I want to climb Mount Everest, but no one has ever climbed Mount Everest. I want to fly. I want to be able to fly through the sky and cross the globe, but no one has ever done that, right? That's insane. And what the Buddha did is much, much more difficult than going to space and landing on the moon. An ordinary person can do that. Full of greed, hatred, and delusion, restlessness, and challenges. They might have all kinds of problems. They can go to the moon. They can fly. They can build rocket ships. They can build planes. They can climb Mount Everest. So it's so much more difficult to become a Buddha when no one else has done that. And it's even harder when you think about the life of the Buddha. The Buddha left home and he practiced meditation under one of the best teachers that existed, right? India was one of the most spiritually advanced places on earth. You just look at the history of the world and it really is that way, right? The amount of spiritual meditation, virtuous and philosophical, all these different aspects of the spiritual life, like both the theory and the practice, were incredibly developed in India, right? They weren't just kind of messing around. They really had a very detailed practice. And so the Buddha was with one of the most advanced teachers of literally the world. And he practiced with them. He realized what he realized. He became a teacher and he was teaching. He was on the level of a teacher. So he had reputation, he had accomplishments, he had success, he had good meditation. He was with one of the best in the world. And he realized that it wasn't what he was looking for. It wasn't the complete liberation. So he left. And then he went to another teacher and he humbled himself down again. He began from the beginning again. He lowered himself again, became a student again after being a teacher. And he practiced that path. He recited those teachings. And then he ended up surpassing his teacher. So becoming even better than the current teacher he was at, Uddhaka Buddha, becoming even better and becoming the leader of that community. And so he is the most advanced spiritual practitioner of probably the world, of the entirety of India. And he had reached the most advanced meditation state possible. He had the teachings available to him. And then he realized that wasn't enough. Like that wasn't it. That wasn't what he was looking for. So then he leaves. And at this point, most of us would be completely just disillusioned or just satisfied with what if we had realized that, right? Because again, it's like no one has done that. And he was the best. There was no one better already at this time. He was already better than Uddaka Buddha, because Uddaka Buddha hadn't realized what the Buddha himself had realized from his teacher. So he was already the best alive, probably in the world. Still, it wasn't enough. And he's had failed twice now. And is failed in the sense he hadn't achieved what he wanted. He couldn't get it from his teachers. And yet he still says, well, I'm going to keep trying anyway. With no example, right, in his life, no teaching, no one who could guide him. And you might, at this point, you would just be inclined, like I said, to give up, because what you've reached the best that you can, and there's nothing else, and there's no one else to follow, and there's no other example. And yet he does, and he continues, and then he continues practicing, and he does severe practices, right, very difficult practices, and he continues and strives through that, and it's incredibly difficult. He keeps going, he keeps training, he keeps going, and at a certain point he realizes that doesn't work either. Like, he eventually almost kills himself, and he realizes that is not the way. So at that point you might think, okay, that's enough, right? Like, okay, he's tried everything, he's got to the best that there possibly is, then he's nearly killed himself continuing to experiment on his own, and that doesn't work. And then he says, well, you know what, there must still be a way. He still continues, like, he still practices to realize this. So people would just think that you are crazy, that it's impossible. And I think that any one of us would not be able to do that. Then eventually but he decides, and he says, he sits down and he forms the aspiration, he forms the determination and the tradition, he says, and he then encourages his disciples. He says, gladly let just merely flesh, sinews, and bones be left. He says that he will not get up. He will just continue striving and attaining whatever he can until he attains enlightenment. So, like, just imagine making a determination to sit just for 4 hours is one of the hardest things you can do. Like, if you don't have the ability to just abide in bliss for the whole time, just sitting down, having no idea that you're gonna, you don't know what the goal even is, and you determine to sit there until you attain enlightenment, that you will let your body die before you get up. It could be days, it could be weeks, and yet he does that. It's completely sincerely, like, it's not a bluff, right? He really makes that determination. He really decides he's going to sit there, he's going to practice, he's going to put forth this energy until he's going to be willing to die until he attains enlightenment, not having a sense of the goal, not having any. And he does that, and then he realizes enlightenment for himself. Then he spends 45 years of his life teaching out of compassion for people. 45 years, right? You have people misbehaving, right? It gets busy, you get a crowd around him, he can't just enjoy, he's done all this work. He has traveled since beginningless time through hell, through the animal realm, through the human realm, through the ghost realm, through the God realms, and he has cycled again and again, experienced horrible suffering, he has experienced everything there is to experience, and he's finally reached the end. And yet you think, oh, you want to enjoy it, right? You might want to retire after that. Like, you have a career of literally beginningless time, and you might want to retire once you reach the end of your job, right? You might want to be, okay, now it's time to retire. But yet he doesn't. No, he continues. He spends his whole life teaching and meeting people and advising people and going out of his way to help people. So just the amount of dedication that he had to himself and his own practice, and then to the whole world, is immense. It's really unimaginable, like, just completely unimaginable. So the quality of a Samma Sambuddha, the second quality, that is what we're talking about. That is what a Samma Sambuddha is. It's someone who realizes that complete enlightenment without a teacher, and then they establish a community of disciples. And not only does he not only does he teach, he is a successful teacher. So he actually acquires disciples who realize what he realized. And so the Buddha has this quality of being a Samma Sambuddha, and he's not unique in this. There's a succession. Every time a Buddha arises, they have this quality of being a Samma Sambuddha. So he is like a manifestation of the Dhamma. He is born of the Dhamma. He is heir to the Dhamma. And what he teaches is just a manifestation of that. So that's a really amazing quality. So maybe you might meditate just on that quality of the Buddha. Then it says he's Vijja Charana Sampanno. Okay, we're going to have to speed it up because I'm going. He's Vijja Charana Sampanno. Vijja Charana Sampanno. That means he has perfectly acquired, he is completely endowed with knowledge and good conduct, right? So not just his knowledge, but also his conduct. Not just his behavior, but also his knowledge. So some people, like, they're very good at, maybe they have really good virtue, really good meditators, but they don't really have perfect knowledge, right? Other people, they might have a lot of knowledge, but they don't really have very good conduct and meditation. But the Buddha had perfect both of them complete. So that's another quality. You might just recollect, like, wow, he, even in private, his conduct was perfect. It says in this, even in private, his knowledge was not, he wasn't pretending, right? He really had that. And he really had conduct that was perfect, that was good. It wasn't a show. And so both of them combined. So that's also a really amazing quality. Sugato, gata means to be arrived at a destination. So sugata means to be arrived at a good place. And the word for heaven in Pali is sugati, like a good destination. So sugato, it means almost like divine or heavenly, right? So it's like he has achieved heaven on earth. He has become divine. He has become holy, complete, blissful in this very life. In his own life, he had become even surpassing the gods, surpassing the pleasures of heaven. So his manifestation, he had that bliss to him, right? He was blissful, he was happy, he was contented and peaceful and whole, right? The word holy originally comes from the same word that we say whole, like a person who is complete. So he is like a deity on earth. He's a blissful, complete, divine person on earth. He's a human that's complete. And so sugata, you might just recollect, like, oh, the Buddha, he wasn't this kind of depressed, harsh person. He was divine and blissful and had achieved what people achieve by going to heaven in his own life. So that's another quality, sugato. Lokavido means knower of the world. Knower of the world. So here at the monastery, we recite regularly a sutta where the Buddha says that he knows, he's awoken to the world, he's awoken to the rising of the world, he's awoken to the cessation of the world, and he's awoken to the path leading to the cessation of the world. And famously, the first astronaut, right, the world's first astronaut, the world's first space traveler, Rohitasa, maybe not the first, but the first that seems to be mentioned in the suttas, is he says that he asked the Buddha, is it possible by traveling to reach the end of the world, the end of the cosmos? And the Buddha says, it's not possible by traveling to reach the end of the cosmos, the end of the universe, but yet you must reach the end of the universe in order to end suffering. And so the Buddha, the world, right, is the world of our life. It's the world of existence. It's the world of samsara. And samsara is really a process that we experience. And it's not really a fixed place, right, in that sense. It's like the cycle of life. And life is a thing that we're going through. So the world, it means really suffering, right? It's the first noble truth. The arising of the world refers to the second noble truth. So like having a mind and a body, right? Experiencing the world, being in the world, that's a conditioned experience. And so the Buddha, he fully knew that. He fully knew the entirety of the Four Noble Truths, the entirety of mind and body, the entirety of the experiences, the range of experiences in samsara. The other day we talked about his range being infinite. That means that he knows the entirety of samsara. He knows the details, or you could say the nature of the hell, ghost, human, gods, everything. He knows it all, because you have to reach the end of the world. You have to go to the complete end of the cosmos, not by traveling, but through your practice, in order to end suffering. And so the Buddha had done that. He had gone to the end of the world. He had realized the end of the world, as he himself says. So he knows the world, both, you could say, internally, in terms of the arising of rebirth, the arising of the mind and body, and externally in terms of what are the consequences of what is the mind and body that arises, right? What is the nature of samsara? What are the experiences that can arise? So he knows karma and its results. He knows the results of craving and the continuation of the cycle of rebirth. He knows the different realms. And so he knows both internally and externally the entire world. So that is a really amazing quality, right? Lokavido. Anuttaro Purisa Dhammasarati. This means the unsurpassed, so the supreme. There's no one better at training people who can be tamed, at guiding people who can be tamed, right? Just like it's very difficult to tame a horse or to tame an elephant, even to train a dog, right? We have a cat here who's very difficult. He's very stubborn. The Buddha can train. He's unsurpassed at training people, at guiding people. He's like a charioteer who trains and tames the horses. And so he is the best at that, right? Like I mentioned before, one of the qualities of the Sammasambuddha is that they teach. They establish disciples. And the Buddha taught, and he had disciples who equaled him in wisdom, who equaled him in psychic power, who equaled him in meditation, who equaled him in precepts, who equaled him in different qualities, right? Who equaled him in recollecting past lives, who equaled him in the divine eye. So he had many different disciples, and each of them had a really great quality. And his disciples realized the same enlightenment that he realized, right? So he was able to train and tame so many people. And even down to this current day, we have the teachings of the Buddha, right? It's the same man, it's the same person. We have his teachings, and people continue to practice and realize those. So that's really amazing, right? How many teachers have disciples who not only do they reach where the teacher reached, but they also continue to have disciples who realize that thousands of years later, right? That is very rare. So the Buddha is an amazing teacher. He was an amazing tamer of people. So we can also recollect, like, oh wow, that we want to be tamed, right? We want to allow ourselves to be tamed. We don't want to make it harder for ourselves and harder for the Buddha, metaphorically speaking, right? He's given these out of compassion, so we can allow ourselves to be tamed and allow his teaching to work through us, allow ourselves to just surrender, to not use our willpower and fight, but just allow ourselves to follow the path, right? Because the Buddha, he's laid out the path the best that it can be laid out. Okay, now we only have a few more qualities left. So Sattha Deva Manusanang. This means he's the teacher of devas, of angels or gods, and humans. So he's a teacher, right? We talked about he's the best teacher. But he doesn't just teach humans, he also teaches divine beings. So there are said many times in the suttas, divine beings, angels and spirits, gods, they come to learn from the Buddha. So many people in this world, they pray to gods, right? They pray to God or to gods, to spirits and angels, to saints. But the Buddha taught those. So in Buddhism, we don't worship gods in the same way that we revere them as a kind of holy, the supreme thing to worthy of worship, right? The Buddha and the Arahants and so on, those are the people worthy of worship, right? The Buddha, the Dhamma, the Noble Sangha. However, it doesn't mean that gods don't exist in Buddhism, right? So there are the talk of angels and spirits and so on. And the Buddha realized that as part of him knowing the world, but he also taught them. So they were his disciples. And so it's that not only is he good at teaching, is he the best at teaching, he's also the best, you could say the most uplifted, the most elevated teacher, right? He teaches even the gods are his disciples. So that's another quality, like, wow, he taught gods, he taught all these different beings, and he could meet them and teach them. And he had disciples who realized enlightenment, even gods who realized stages of enlightenment. Buddha, the next quality, Buddha means awakened. So we kind of talked about this. Buddha is, he awoke from a sleep, right? It's like we're living in a slumber of confusion, slumber of delusion. And the Buddha awoke from that and he became Buddha, he became awake. So how can we wake up, right? How can we bring that quality of wakefulness and of clarity and of coming to awaken to reality? That's Buddha. So we can recollect, oh, he was Buddha. Very simple, but very profound, right? He was awakened. He was awakened. He was aware of the nature of the world. Buddha. He was a Buddha. And the last one, Bhagava. So like I said, Bhagava means holy, revered, spiritual teacher. And in other Indian traditions, they'll call their teacher Bhagava, right? So the Jains would call Mahavira Bhagava. And even today, different people, they might call, for example, Indian religions who believe in a supreme God, they might call that God Bhagava. So actually, I think in English, one of the best translations of Bhagava, in my opinion, would actually be Lord. So although it sounds to some people very kind of, they don't like that word, but I think that when you hear the word, like the Lord, right, in English, it has this sense of like a really, really faithful, devoted person would say that of the person that they believe the most in, right? The most supreme being in their belief system, right? Like the Lord. There is no one higher. And that is what Bhagavan means. So it is an incredibly reverential term. Like it's a very, very reverential. It's very, very respectful. It's not casual at all. So it's a very, very reverential word. It means the Lord. And the word Bhagava is also used actually for lords. Bhaga literally means like a portion or a share. And Bhagava means someone who has the shares. They have the wealth, the portions. And so the way that this worked traditionally was that the lord, right, like the feudal lord, would distribute out the portions of wealth that were owed to the different like fiefs and so on, right, giving land and giving wealth, distributing money and food. So in secular society, the Bhagava was the lord, the person who had all the wealth, who distributed it out to society. So it literally means like a lord, like a person who has all that wealth that they distributed out. And the Buddha is the Lord in terms of the Dhamma, right? So he has the Bhagga that he shares is the Dhamma. So he is like the person who has all that wealth, and he shares it out to other people. He's like a teacher. He's a wealthy figure in terms of spiritual wealth, and he's also filled with merit, filled with the perfect accomplishment of merit and wisdom, right? The supreme, the highest possible experience, you could say, in samsara is to become a Sammasambuddha. There is nothing higher. Like there is no higher station than being a Buddha, a full Buddha. So he is the completion of merit, of wisdom. He has all the wealth. He's the richest person that could ever exist. And then he shares that out and distributes it to the people, distributes it to the nations. So that's the quality of Bhagavad. It's like the teacher, the Lord, our holy figure, our most inspiring person, and also the person who has all this wealth, who then they share it out. So those are the qualities of the Buddha, and I apologize for going on about that. I know that was probably that was quite a long time, and that we might have some questions here, but I hope that is really inspiring and uplifting to you, especially as we approach Vesak. And so you can feel free to explore these qualities and look into them more. And like I said, if you want to meditate on them, you can recite them out loud. You can recite them in your mind. And then you can select 1, 2, 3, and kind of narrow it down and just really savor that. It's almost like tasting. You can try to taste the quality, right? Try to feel like, what is that quality of the Buddha? Arahant, Sammasambuddha. You can pick one. You can even start with all 9. And then as you meditate in the mind, you can start to narrow it down to fewer. Maybe start getting down from 9, select like a few of them. And then down from those, you can pick the one that most inspires you. And you can even meditate on one for like a week or a month, or you can do a different one every day, or you can just spontaneously, like whatever feels good that day, meditating on that quality. Or you can even just stick with all 9, just recite all 9 out loud or mentally, and just recollect those qualities and imagine the qualities of the Buddha and the presence of the Buddha in that way to uplift the heart and inspire the heart. So that's my my share on the recollecting the Buddha and the qualities of the Buddha. So this time we can say 3 sadhus together, and then I can go ahead and answer any questions before we close. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, friends, so let's see here. I see some comments. I saw one from Pramodita. Hello, Pramo. Pramodita says, is Buddha literally talking about a battle here, or is it a metaphor for something we as humans can't comprehend? And yet this is one of the commonly chanted suttas. Yes, the Jagga Sutta is one of the main Paritta suttas, so it's often chanted for different ceremonies, or if you're actually out in the woods, often monks will also chant it. So is he literally talking about a battle? I would say it's not clear. So the Buddha says, once upon a time. He says, Bhuta, which sometimes he uses this to tell stories, which it's often not clear, is he really intending it in a literal way? It's kind of like you might say, once upon a time, there was, a mythical figure. Like once upon a time, Jack and Jill were pulling water up the well, and you start telling a fable, right? Like a story. So I would say it's not necessarily a literal story, But he is talking about a battle. That's what it's literally about a battle. That's what the story is about. So whether it happened or not, I would say it's kind of beside the point. Like it's not really something that we can know, and it doesn't really change the essence of the teaching, right? The point of the teaching is that looking up to a leader, looking up to a teacher, even a divine person like a god, that's not going to be a sure way to get rid of fear. But looking up to a supreme person, a supreme teacher and leader, that is. So he's talking about, we can recollect the qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. That's really the best qualities to recollect and to look to for inspiration. And Rebecca says that she had a pilgrimage and says, I recommend it especially for Westerners who haven't grown up with the practice. So sadhu, I hope that people who haven't gone on pilgrimage get the opportunity. And Sud asks, it is said recollection of the Buddha is a merit-making activity. Why is it so? And Buddha said somewhere that if there is one thing that leads to nirvana, it is buddhanusati. Can you help explain why that is said so and in what context? Okay, so why is it that buddhanusati is a merit-making activity? Well, when we merit, so punya, is an act of good karma, right? It's you could say merit is like the fruits of good karma, right? So when you make good karma, it builds up this kind of good energy, this kind of good potential within yourself that then ripens as happiness. So merit is like the happiness that builds right from making good karma. And so when you do a good deed like giving, you're training. What does the merit come from there? The merit doesn't come from moving your arms. It doesn't come from saying particular words. It comes from the intentions behind the actions, right? That's why the Buddha says that intention is karma. So when we have an intention and then we act that out through our body, our speech, or simply through our thoughts, through our the way that we move our mind, that intention, that is what creates karma, right? So what is it that creates merit when you do an act of generosity, right? It's the intention of giving. It's the intention of letting go. It's the intention of supporting and helping others, of making others happy. So it's a kind of wholesome, helpful intention that cultivates goodness, right? And then that creates this merit, right? So it's the same when we follow sila, right? So why is it that not killing creates merit? Well, because we have an intention to refrain from harming others, and so it's actually an intention of non-harm, of helping, of restraint, and so on. So it creates merit because of the intention. And when we do meditation practice, the way meditation creates merit because you're working directly with purifying your intentions. So you're purifying your intentions directly. It's the most direct way to work with the mind, right? So that's why it's also harder. So meditation is harder than generosity and virtue because physical things are easier to enact. And you can train your mind through physical actions and physical words. So the words, the actions, they're kind of like training wheels, which help us train our mind. But meditation is an extension of virtue because it's a way of training the exact same qualities like gentleness, awareness, restraint, letting go, generosity. We train the exact same qualities in meditation as we do when we give and when we practice virtue. But we just do it in a more subtle, direct way, working directly with the mind, working directly with our intentions. And so recollecting the Buddha, we are building intentions of setting our mind focused on the Buddha's teachings. So if you intend to focus on the Buddha, on the Buddha's teachings, then what are you doing? You're inclining your mind towards the Dhamma, right? Inclining your mind towards the Dhamma is going to be inclining yourself towards happiness, right? Just like inclining your mind towards when you do virtue and you start inclining the mind towards more heavenly states, well, it's merit because it leads to happiness. So inclining the mind towards Dhamma are intentions which lead to happiness. And they can lead, especially if they're followed all the way through, to nirvana, right? Through to freedom, to liberation. So that's the highest happiness, the highest possible fruits of merit, you could say. Merit in the non-worldly sense. And so that's why the next part of your question, you say, said it leads to nirvana. How is that so, right? Well, when you focus your mind on a Buddha and you recollect the qualities of the Buddha, you develop faith and you can develop joy, right? As you develop joy, your mind can become more settled and you can develop samadhi. So samadhi is very meritorious because you're developing an elevated, divine, lofty state of mind. A state of mind which doesn't focus on worldly low things, which removes defilements. Practicing buddhanusati, you're removing greed, just like when you practice generosity. You're removing hatred, just like when you practice virtue. You're removing delusion because you're clarifying the mind from restlessness and confusion and sleepiness. So you're removing defilements. That's all merit. Merit is doing good things, which removes defilements. And you're doing a particularly good form of merit because you're recollecting and dedicating your mind to focus not on reward in this life or on recognition or fame or on heavenly rebirth, but you're focusing your mind on the Buddha, on the supreme example of liberation, of freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion, of freedom from rebirth, of letting go, right? So it's the supreme best focus rather than just focusing on a more worldly benefit. So you're removing defilements, you're purifying your intentions, you're calming your mind, you're making your mind pure, which is all meritorious, and you're doing it in a way which focuses you towards the goal. So it's even more, it inclines you towards liberation. And so how does it lead to nirvana? Well, if you develop samadhi and if you focus on the Dhamma, then eventually it will incline your mind to realize the Dhamma through those things, right? So that's why it develops merit and so on. And then you say it removes fear. In what context does it do so? And how should we use this in our daily life? I would say just practicing this meditation, when you remove greed, hatred, and delusion, you remove fear from the mind. Because fear is a kind of aversion or we don't want to experience something. So that's what fear is, right? It's I don't want to experience this thing. So through practicing Buddhanusati, you purify your mind and make it peaceful and stable and inspired by the potential of becoming a Buddha or becoming enlightened. And so then you indirectly or directly remove the fear. And you use it in your daily life just by always remember the Buddha. Even if you can't meditate formally, just remember, right? The Buddha went through difficulty out of compassion to teach me, so I should follow his example. I have this great guide. I should follow that. I shouldn't be afraid. I can trust in this path. So, yeah. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you have a beautiful time, beautiful month, and a beautiful practice. Sadhu to all your dedication and your devotion, and to listening to this Dhamma talk. So rejoicing in the merits of your practice, listening and practicing along here, and have a beautiful morning. And we will see you this evening for monk chat if you're there.